Well, we're heading into I plan to continue reading Ramayana till I guess it ends, although it's eternal. So we're in a really exciting section. Chapter 5 is titled "The War Begins." They've crossed the ocean. Ravana played his trick with the mystical head that looked like Ram's and his bow that looked like Ram's bow, and Sita was in great despair, more than great despair. She fell apart. He got called away to go to a council. The wife of Vibhishan came, Sarama, and let Sita know it was a magician's trick. Ram is going to conquer. Don't worry. Any service you like, I can take you to see him. And Sita said, "That's before you do that, go see what Ravana's plan is, and then let me know. Then I be able to decide whether I should deliver a message to Ram or not." So Sarama knew how to be invisible. She went into the chamber where they're having what to do discussion. The father, Ravana's grandfather, so the father, the grandfather, is that right? Maternal grandfather, Malyavan, spoke very clearly, very strongly, very similar to what Vibhishan had said. Ravana dismissed him. Malyavan quietly turned and just left the chamber. And Ravana is preparing for war. He posted powerful generals at each of the city's 4 gates, all of them equipped with forces of hundreds of thousands of fierce Rakshasas. Ravana himself would visit each gate in turn. Satisfied that everything was secure, the demon then retired to his own chambers. That was the end of the previous chapter. So now we're with Ram. Outside Lanka, Ram held council with his chiefs. They discussed how to assail the city. Vibhishan reported that his 4 ministers had entered the city in the form of birds. Wow. They had carefully surveyed everything. Vibhishan described the defense arrangements. At the eastern gate stands Prahasta, the commander-in-chief. At the southern gate is Mahaparshva and Mahodara, 2 almost invincible Rakshasas. Stationed at the western gate is Ravana's cunning and fearful son Indrajit, who was highly dangerous in battle. At the northern gate is Ravana himself. Vibhishan told Ram how many Rakshasas they faced. They numbered tens of millions, all of them equipped with fierce weapons of every description. It was not going to be an easy fight. Ram smiled. He issued orders detailing different monkeys to attack each gate. Sugriva, Jambavan, and Vibhishan should remain at the center of the army. Nila would assault the eastern side, Angada the south, Hanuman the west, and Ram himself would attack the northern gate, same gate where Ravana was. He wanted to waste no time in confronting Ravana directly. Ram ordered that the monkeys should fight with their natural forms only. This would be their distinguishing mark. Ram expected that the demons would try trickery and assume different forms. The monkeys would have the best chance of recognizing each other if they remained in their own forms. Evening was approaching. The battle would commence the next day. Ram decided to ascend Suvila mountain and spend the night there. As he climbed the mountain, he spoke with Lakshmana. "We shall be able to survey Lanka from this vantage point. I now long for the battle to begin. My anger towards Ravana is growing at every moment. The whole Rakshasa race will perish on account of their mean-minded and stubborn king." Ram reached the top of Mount Suvela, along with hundreds of the foremost monkey warriors. They gazed at Lanka, which glowed red in the light of the setting sun. Along its defensive wall, which appeared like a sheer cliff face, there seemed to be another dark wall in the shape of a compact row of Rakshasas. No gap could be seen anywhere in the lines of heavily armed demons. The monkeys roared in anticipation. As they stared at their enemy, the sun set and a full moon rose. Ram and the monkeys alertly watched for any signs of treacherous night assault by the Rakshasas. After sunrise the following day, the monkeys closely surveyed Lanka again. Atop the Trikuta mountain, the city appeared charming, with its towering white gates and gold and silver fortifications. Mansions and palaces and tall golden domed temples crowded the city. The monkeys saw various devices lined up along the outer wall, ready for the battle. As the Rakshasas readied themselves for battle, the thunder of drums and the blowing of conchas and trumpets was tumultuous. As Ram and the monkeys looked across at Lanka, they saw in the distance Ravana himself. The demon appeared at the top of the city gate, clad in red robes and adorned with shining scarlet gems. He was being fanned on all sides, and a large white parasol was held over his head. Seeing him there, Sugriva became impetuous. He immediately sprang from the mountaintop, and with one mighty bound landed near the demon king. He rushed up to him and said, "I am a friend and servant of Ram, ruler of the world. Display your power, O Rakshasa, for I shall not spare you today." With that, Sugriva leaped upon Ravana and dashed his shining diadem, means crown, to the ground. The Rakshasa shook him off and stood for the fight. He spoke harshly. "Today I will break your beautiful neck, O monkey." Ravana called out of Sugriva and threw him forcefully to the ground, but the monkey bounced up like a ball. He closed on Ravana and grasped him tightly. As they pummeled, kneed, and scratched one another, they appeared like two tall trees intertwined together and shaken by a gale. The limbs were bathed in blood and perspiration as they locked together, grunting furiously. Both were endowed with extraordinary might, and they fought with tremendous power. They fell to the ground and rolled over, dropping from the flat roof of the gate to the ground below, still violently belaboring each other. As both were experts at wrestling, they employed various maneuvers with great skill. They appeared like a lion and a tiger engaged in a furious fight to death. Breaking apart, they moved around in a circle, each rebuking the other with harsh words. They stood in diverse postures and moved about in many ways, now rushing, now wheeling, now leaping high, now crouching. As they struck and dodged one another with blinding speed, they appeared graceful, but neither could overpower the other. Becoming tired of the bout, Ravana decided to exhibit his supernatural power. Now, I wonder if Sugriva was wearing that necklace that takes away half the power of the opponent. That would be good. Sugriva realized this and immediately sprang high, landing again on the roof of the gate. Taking another great bound, he soared across to the Suvela mountain. Ravana was left standing angrily on the ground. Seeing that he had returned to the side of Ram and Lakshman, the demon decided not to pursue the monkey. The battle with the prince would come soon enough. Ram embraced Sugriva and examined the wounds Ravana had inflicted upon him. Feeling a little annoyed with the monkey, Ram admonished him out of love. Kings should not act in such a rash way. O mighty one, if anything had happened to you, then what would have become of me? If you had been slain, then I surely would not have survived. Please do not do so. Please do not be so impetuous again. Sugriva bowed to Ram and replied, seeing that disgusting demon who was borne away with your wife, I lost control of myself. I had to give him a beating. I'm sorry. Ram praised Sugriva's courage and strength, and then turned to Lakshman. O valiant brother, the time for battle has arrived. We should array our forces in preparation. Many terrible omens are visible, boding massive destruction and death. The earth will soon be covered with rocks, darts, arrows, and swords hurled by monkeys and rakshasas. Soon a thick morass of flesh and blood will spread on all sides. Surrounded by monkeys and bears, we should immediately march on Lanka. Ram rapidly descended the mountain, followed by his brother. Upon reaching the foot of the mountain, he reviewed the army. Then, with Sugriva's assistance, he marshaled the troops ready for the battle. At an auspicious moment, he ordered them to an advance. The army moved off, sending up a roar which made the earth shake and the walls of Lanka vibrate. The different Vanara commanders soon reached their respective positions at the gates of Lanka. Ram himself stood at the northern gate. Sugriva remained at a distance from the city. Along with Lakshman and Vibhishan, he detailed divisions of troops to support each of the commanders. Seizing hold of fully grown trees and massive boulders, the monkeys rushed forward, their long tails raised in anger and their terrible teeth bared. Their eyes were bloodshot and their faces contorted with fury. As they bounded high in the air, they seemed like a swarm of locusts. The growls and roars of the fierce bears, led by Jambavan, sounded like the rush of the mighty ocean. The army quickly surrounded the city of Lanka, making it difficult even for the wind to approach. Looking out from the walls, the Rakshasas were filled with wonder upon seeing the flood of monkeys and bears. They ran about in all directions, making ready to defend their city. Ram summoned Angada and asked him to carry a message to Ravana. This was the demon's last chance. If he returned Sita now, then a battle could be averted. Ram said to Angada, "You should approach the 10-headed monster on my behalf. Tell him that his cup of sins has now overflowed. Fierce retribution will shortly ensue for all his acts of violence against the rishis, gods, Gandharvas, Apsaras, Yakshas, and others. What to speak of his depraved act of stealing Sita from me. His arrogance, born of Brahma's boon, will shortly be smashed by me. Soon he will see his city rent asunder by the Rakshasas lying lifeless on the ground. Standing firm in battle, I will soon force him to throw down his body. Ram offered Ravana the opportunity to surrender. He could return Sita now and the army would leave peacefully. Otherwise, the world would soon be rid of the Rakshasas, barring those who sought Ram's shelter. Angada leapt high and crossed over the walls of Lanka. Confounding the demons by his speed and movement, he swiftly arrived before Ravana. He stood a short distance from the Rakshasa and announced himself to be Ram's messenger. He then delivered the message exactly as he had heard it from Ram. Ravana was seized by fury. He commanded his ministers to capture and kill Angada. 4 huge demons immediately took hold of Angada by his arms. The monkey, who blazed like a fire, allowed the Rakshasas to hold him. Taking all 4 of them, still clinging to his arms, he leaped up onto a high ledge. He then dashed the demons together and they fell senseless to the ground. The monkey let out a great shout proclaiming his name and roaring, "Victory to Ram!" With a great leap he returned to Ram, smashing down the wall from which he jumped. Ravana's reply to Ram was clear enough. Witnessing this display of power, Ravana became remorse. He foresaw his own destruction. The demon sat sighing amid his ministers, but still he gave no thought of the possibility of surrender. Ram affectionately received Angada back. Hearing then of Ravana's cruel response, he resolved to fight and immediately gave the order to charge. Mounted upon the back of a monkey, Ram led the attack himself. The entire earth around Lanka was rendered brown by the mass of monkeys and bears. They filled the moats and completely covered the defensive walls as they rapidly scaled them. The air was filled with cries of "Victory to Ram and Sugriva!" Many mighty monkeys rose quickly to the tops of the walls, screaming ferociously. They poured onto the ramparts and tore into the Rakshasas with their teeth and nails. Ravana ordered his troops to rush against the enemy. A great clamor was raised. Thousands of drums were beaten and with golden sticks, creating a terrible din. Rakshasas of hideous features blew conches and trumpets and rallied Ravana's vast forces to the fight. With their dark limbs adorned with brilliant jewels, the Rakshasas seemed like so many clouds lit by lightning. They joyfully rushed forth like the waves of the ocean swollen with the rains of the universal destruction. The trumpeting of elephants, the neighing of horses, the clatter of chariots, and the shouts of demons made the earth and sky resound. Battle scene. The Rakshasas struck the monkeys with their flaming maces, javelins, pikes, and axes. The monkeys grasped hold of the demons with their powerful arms and hauled them down from the walls. They aimed terrible blows at the Rakshasas with their fists and feet. The demons replied with darts and arrows. As they fought, they shouted out their respective names. All around Lanka there were monkeys, bears, and Rakshasas locked in fierce combat. The earth quickly became covered with a mire of flesh and blood. Great heroes among the Rakshasas mounted brilliant chariots and came out of the city. With their dazzling coats of mail, they shone like fire. Others sallied forth on the backs of gigantic elephants, while others charged out on great steeds. They were supported by tens of thousands of Rakshasas on foot, their frightening faces twisted in fury, shouting, "Victory to the king!" The Rakshasas issued forth out for battle like a black river gushing out of the city gates. Some of them took to the air and swooped down upon Ram's army, wielding huge scimitars. Others fought on foot, raising their frightful weapons and screaming in anger. The Vanaras met them, surging forward toward them with shouts of joy. The two armies appeared like heaven and earth colliding in the sky. Great duels took place between the heroes on both sides. Angada fought with Indrajit, even as Shiva had contended with the demon Andhaka. Demon Andhaka. Anyone know the demon Andhaka and Lord Shiva fighting? Hanuman fought a furious battle with the huge Rakshasa Sharabha, while Vibhishan battled with a violent Rakshasa called Suparshva. Sugriva closed with Pragasha, and Lakshmana with Durmukha. Durmukha, what a name. 4 of the most powerful Rakshasas charged Ram, who stood on the battlefield shining like a smokeless fire. A fierce and confused fight raged. All of the combatants sought a quick victory, and they fought with tremendous force. A stream of blood flowed across the ground, floating dead bodies that looked like logs, with hair resembling weeds. Heads, arms, legs, and trunks rolled about. The clamor of the fight was deafening. It struck terror in the hearts of all those who were not heroes in battle. I mean, the good news is all the Vanaras were brought back to life. But, a lot of them lost their life. Sharabha hurled at Hanuman a blazing lance, which pierced the monkey in the breast. Not tolerating the attack, Hanuman sprang onto the demon's chariot and with his bare hands smashed it, along with the Rakshasa himself. Sugriva took up a massive sal tree and brought it down upon Pragasha's chariot, killing the Rakshasa outright. A fierce and notorious demon named Pratapana rushed, yelling, toward Nala and lacerated him with hundreds of sharp arrows. With one of those arrows, Nala bounded onto the demon's chariot and gouged out his eyes. With a hail of arrows, Lakshmana overwhelmed Durmukha, and with one swift shaft he pierced the demon in the heart. Ram quickly lopped off the heads of the 4 Rakshasas who surrounded him. The powerful Minda, a commander among the monkeys, leaped into the sky and fought the Rakshasa who flew overhead. Catching hold of the powerful demon named Vajra Mushti, he smashed him to the ground, along with his chariot and 4 great steeds. Nikumba, the son of Kumbhakarna, shot 100 swift arrows at Nila. The monkey took up a chariot wheel and rushed toward the Rakshasa who stood laughing in his chariot. Nikumba loosed another 100 fierce shafts at the advancing Nila. Not minding the arrows, Nila whirled the iron wheel and jumped onto the Rakshasa's chariot. Even as Vishnu severs the heads of demons with his chakra, Nila cut off the head of Nikumbha, as well as that of his charioteer. Phew. Vidyunmali, a leader among the Rakshasas, attacked Shushena. Shushena was the medical doctor, right? No? Yes? Yes, Shushena. Vidyunmali attacked Shushena with his gold-encrusted arrows. Roaring again and again, he pierced the monkey with hundreds of sharp arrows. In a rage, Shushena took up a mountainous boulder and hurled it at the demon. Vidyunmali hastily leaped from his chariot as the boulder descended and smashed it to pieces. The demon stood on the ground, mace in hand. Shushena seized a huge rock and darted toward the Rakshasa, who swung his fierce mace at the monkey and caught him on the breast. Unmoved by the blow, Shushena brought the rock down upon the demon's head with the force of a thunderbolt. This is really heavy. I mean, seeing it in a movie or something like that is different than describing it. Vidyunmali fell lifeless to the ground like a tree smashed in a storm. Whew. Many valiant Rakshasas were crushed in this way by mighty heroes among the monkeys and bears. The battlefield was strewn with spears and maces, as well as javelins, lances, and arrows. Smashed chariots lay amid the carcasses of horses and elephants. The headless trunks of Rakshasas and monkeys bounded here and there, spurting blood and finally falling to the ground. Vultures and jackals moved about the field, feasting on flesh and blood. Whew. As night fell, the Rakshasas felt their strength and enthusiasm increase. The fight continued into the night, with the combatants hardly able to recognize one another. Voices were heard to call out, "Are you a monkey or a Rakshasa?" Or shouts of, "Stand and fight," and "Why do you flee?" mixed with the cries of wounded and dying soldiers. The monkeys could see the golden armor of the Rakshasas glinting in the moonlight, and they sprang upon them, tearing them with their sharp teeth and pounding them with their fists. Powerful monkeys dragged down the elephants and horses mounted by demons. Monkey heroes picked up Rakshasas, crushed them in their embrace, and then dropped them lifeless to the ground to be devoured by jackals. Whew. Ram and Lakshman stood together like two brilliant gods. They killed numerous Rakshasas with their swift arrows, including those who ranged invisible through the sky. Not even the heroes among the Rakshasas could approach the two princes as they fought in the midst of the battle. A terrible sound arose as the Rakshasas beat countless kettle drums and large wooden tom-toms and blew thousands of conch shells and trumpets. This sound, mixed with the roars of pain and the clash of weapons, created a horrifying uproar. It was difficult to move across the ground due to the countless corpses lying there. Monkeys and Rakshasas lay on the battlefield with lances and arrows protruding from their lifeless bodies. That first night of battle was like the night of universal dissolution. Millions of warriors were slain. Ghosts and nocturnal fiends ranged about the battlefield, reveling in the scene of carnage and death. The Rakshasas rallied, and, headed by 6 of their mighty chiefs, riding in a line, they rushed in a body toward Ram and Lakshman. Ram released thousands of flaming arrows, which lit up the ground like flares. Almost instantaneously, he struck down the 6 foremost Rakshasas with 6 straight-flying arrows. With other golden-feathered arrows, he tore to pieces hundreds of other Rakshasas who came near him. Lakshman stood behind him and fended off the treacherous demons who attacked Ram from his rear. The demons that approached the princes perished like moths entering a fire. Angada fought a furious battle with Indrajit. With a rock that looked like a mountain peak, he smashed the demon's chariot. Indrajit rose into the air and became invisible. Fatigued from the fight, he retreated. Seeing Angada besting Indrajit, the gods and rishis praised him. Ram and Lakshman also praised the valor of the monkey prince. They called out, "Well done! Bravo!" Hearing his enemy praised, Indrajit fell into a terrible rage. Remaining invisible, the demon loosed sharp arrows which shone like lightning. They seemed to appear out of nowhere and sped toward Ram and Lakshman. Piercing them all over, the Rakshasa used his supernatural power to send arrows like venomous snakes, which caught and bound Ram and Lakshman. The 2 princes fell to the ground, enmeshed in a tight network of writhing serpents, which glow with glowing ethereal bodies. Next chapter is Garuda to the rescue. Ram immediately ordered 10 monkeys to search out Indrajit. Hanuman, Angada, and 8 other Vanara generals bounded into the air and darted about, whirling trees and maces, but they could not locate the demon, who continuously fired at them his swift iron arrows bedecked with buzzard feathers. Woo! Laughing all the while, and keeping out of sight, Indrajit shot hundreds of arrows into the bodies of Ram and Lakshman. No part of their bodies remained visible. Blood flowed profusely from their wounds, and they appeared like trees giving forth red blossoms in spring. Indrajit shouted to them, "Even the ruler of the gods, Indra, could not discern me as I fight invisibly. What then of you 2 humans? I shall now dispatch you to the abode of Yamaraj with my sharp arrows." The demon continued firing his arrows at the 2 bound brothers, who felt distressed and afflicted. They lay upon the ground with their bows fallen from their hands. Arrows with the heads of axes, others with razor heads, and others with heads shaped like calves' teeth, whistled toward them from the sky. Seeing them lying there bathed in blood, the monkeys screeched in agony and fear. They surrounded the fallen princes and shed tears, giving way to despondency. Indrajit considered his enemy defeated. He joyfully left the battlefield and went toward Lanka to give the happy news to his father. The monkeys felt hopeless. They stood, beating their breasts and crying in anguish as they gazed around in the sky. Fearing further attacks from the invisible Indrajit, they saw Vibhishan coming toward them. Some of the monkeys mistook the Rakshasa for Indrajit, and they fled here and there. But Vibhishan reassured them. Looking around with his occult vision, he could discern that Indrajit had left. He told the monkeys not to worry and knelt down by Ram's side. Vibhishan spoke to Sugriva with pain in his voice. These two brothers, who always depend on virtue, have been struck down by Indrajit's treachery. The wicked demon cannot face them in a fair fight, therefore he resorts to sorcery and cowardice. Vibhishan told the monkeys that Ram and Lakshman had been bound by a mystical weapon which Indrajit had received as a boon from Brahma. Even the gods would not be able to release them. This made the monkeys even more anguished. Sugriva lamented loudly, "All Ram's hopes have been dashed today. Our efforts are in vain, and everything is lost. What should we do now?" That's the king. Vibhishan took hold of Sugriva's arm and reassured him. "Take heart, O Monkey King. Conflicts are always of this nature. Victory is never certain. Heroes do not lament when faced with setbacks. Rather, they exert themselves with even more energy. My feeling is that these two princes will recover. Somehow they will shake off these bonds. I am sure. Be strong, for the fear of death should never haunt those devoted to truth and piety." Vibhishan dipped his hand in cool water and wiped Sugriva's eyes. He told him to look closely at Ram and Lakshman. They were still breathing, and their bodies were lustrous. It was clear they were only in a temporary faint. Vibhishan felt sure they would soon return to consciousness and find a way out of their predicament. He left with Jambavan to reassure and rally the rest of the army. As the news of Ram's fall had spread quickly, Sugriva, along with Hanuman and the other leading monkeys, stood by Ram's side, waiting for him to awaken. Chapter 6, Garuda to the rescue. Indrajit entered Lanka, surrounded by the chief Rakshasas, all of them bellowing in joy. The Rakshasa prince went quickly to his father's palace and told him the news. "Your two mortal enemies lie killed on the battlefield, struck down by my sharp arrows. Dispel your fear, O king. Victory is now ours." Ravana sprang to his feet and embraced his son. He was elated and immediately called for the Rakshasas guarding Sita. He instructed them to take the princess in the Pushpaka chariot and show her Ram and Lakshman. He felt sure that Sita would now accept him as her husband. What a fool. The Rakshasas left at once and brought Sita. They placed her on the chariot along with Trijata, who was friendly with the princess. Ordered by Ravana, the chariot rose high above Lanka and went over the battlefield. Sita then saw Ram and Lakshman lying in a pool of blood and covered all over with arrows. She was stricken with agony. Suspecting their death, she held on to Trijata and cried vehemently, "How has this happened? Learned astrologers foretold that I would never be widowed. They predicted that I would be the wife of a pious ruler of the world and would have powerful sons by him. Today, they have all proved false." Sita was completely bewildered. Her body shook as she grieved, comforted by Trijata. She thought of Kaushalya and Sumitra. How would those godly ladies live after hearing that their sons have been killed. Indeed, the whole of Ayodhya would be plunged into despair. Surely destiny was unfathomable and all-powerful. If Ram and Lakshman could be struck down in battle, then even death himself could be killed, which can't happen. Trijata carefully surveyed the scene below. She spoke gently to Sita. From the appearance of the monkeys, I deduce that your husband still lives. An army whose leader is slain is cast about like a rudderless boat on a wide sea. These monkeys are standing firm in their battle array. Clearly they expect Ram to recover. I also see that Ram and Lakshman are still possessed of bodily luster. They are surely still living. Do not lament, princess. Sita embraced Trijata, saying, may your words prove true. She felt a little reassured and prayed that the princes would soon be restored to strength. The chariot returned to Lanka, carrying the mournful princess back to the Ashok Grove. Then there's a break. The monkeys surrounding Ram, softly called out his name, trying to awaken him. Slowly, Ram opened his eyes and looked around. He saw Lakshman lying unconscious by his side, his face streaked with blood. Ram spoke in a voice choked with sobs. What purpose of mine will be served by recovering Sita and my gallant brother lies slain in battle? I might find another wife like Sita, but I could never find a companion like Lakshman anywhere in this world. The prince followed me to the forest, sharing with me every happiness and distress. I shall now follow him to Yamaraja's abode. Ram condemned himself. It was his fault that Lakshman had been killed. What was the use of his vain boasting that Ravan would be slain and Vibhishan and so there's this commentary that says both are existing within Ram simultaneously. His consciousness of his divinity and his consciousness of being immortal. And sometimes one rises and the other subsides. Sometimes the other way around. Sometimes they're both present. You know, it's a lila, and it's a rasa. He's enjoying certain moods that are ecstatic loves, where there's this overwhelming sadness, but it's a secondary rasa that just rises and then subsides. But he's speaking like, and at one time he's going to destroy the whole universe, and then another time he's, useless. Anyway, it's very intriguing. Now everything is finished. Ram told Sugriva to return to Kishkinda. He thanked him and the other monkeys and bears for their service. Now they could go home. The monkeys stood with tears falling from their eyes. Sugriva burned with fury. He looked toward Lanka. The Rakshasas would pay for this outrage. He would personally annihilate every last one of them, including Ravana and Indrajit. Then he would recover Sita and bring her back to Ram. Clenching his fist, he said to Angada, take Ram and Lakshman back to Kishkinda. Expert physicians may heal them with celestial herbs. For my part, I shall remain here until the business is finished. No Rakshasa will survive today. As Sugriva spoke, there suddenly arose a fierce wind. Dark clouds appeared with flashes of lightning. The ground shook and trees toppled over. A sound like the steady beat of some gigantic drum was heard. The monkeys gazed around and saw in the sky Garuda, Vishnu's great eagle carrier. The powerful bird glided down, landing near Ram. As he descended, the serpent bonds of the brothers immediately fell away. The ethereal snakes that had wrapped themselves around the princes quickly disappeared into the sky. Yay, Garuda! Haribo. Garuda, who appeared in a half-human form with 2 arms, bowed before Ram with folded palms. He knelt by the brothers and gently wiped their faces. At once their wounds were healed, and their bodies became brilliant. Lakshman opened his eyes and sat up. All the monkeys cheered loudly and leaped about with screeches of joy. Garuda raised the 2 brothers. Ram embraced him with affection, saying, "It is fortunate indeed that you have appeared here, O gallant bird. We have been saved from a great calamity at the hands of Indrajit. Pray, tell us, who are you?" Glowing with celestial brilliance and adorned with heavenly jewels and garlands. Garuda told Ram his name. "Surely you know me, O Ram, as I am always your servant. Consider me your own breath, moving outside your body. I heard that Indrajit had employed the Naga sons of Kadru. He converted those powerful serpents into arrows by means of sorcery. I came here quickly with the desire to dispatch my venomous prey, but they fled away. Simply upon seeing me, grant me leave to pursue them. I'm hungry." Ram embraced Garuda and gave him permission to leave. The bird assured Ram that the Rakshasas would soon be overcome. Indrajit would not again be able to employ the serpent weapon. Then, after going respectfully around the 2 princes, he rose into the skies, shining like the sun and filling the whole region with the wind raised by his wings. Ram and Lakshman stood ready for battle. Wow. That's too much. Whew. The monkeys and bears roared in joy, uprooting huge trees and brandishing them. They swarmed toward the gates of Lanka, shouting for the Rakshasas to come out and fight. Beating clay drums and blowing their conchas, the army raised a massive tumult, which terrified the Rakshasas, who gazed from the city walls in amazement. Break. Ravana sat in his palace. He spent the night celebrating, having sent messengers all around Lanka to declare that Ram and Lakshman were dead. As dawn approached, he was thinking of Sita. Now she would surely be his. He straightened his disheveled clothes and prepared to go to the princess. Suddenly, from outside the city, he heard crashing of drums and shouts of Ram's army. "What is this?" he exclaimed in surprise. He got up with a start and shouted for his ministers. How could the monkeys rally with their leaders slain? Something was wrong. The demon ordered his minister to find out what was happening. Spies left at once and went to the top of the city walls. From there they saw Ram and Lakshman and Sugriva at the head of the army besieging the city. The spies reported to Ravan, "The 2 human brothers are standing like a pair of lordly elephants that have broken their fetters. All around them stand the monkeys and bears roaring for battle." Ravana turned pale. This was a disaster. Surely the Rakshasas were in danger now. Ram had escaped from a weapon which had even overpowered Indra. It seemed that some invincible power protected this human. The Rakshasa king turned to his commander-in-chief, Dhum Raksha, and ordered him to march at once to fight with Ram. "Take with you the mightiest of the Rakshasas," Ravana commanded. "Use any means whatsoever. Ram must be defeated." Dhum Raksha left Ravana's palace roaring exultantly and longing for battle. He was surrounded by demons with fierce features who clutched spiked maces, sharp, razor-sharp spears, and heavy iron cudgels, clad in golden mail and mounted upon chariots drawn by fiends. They rushed out of the city gates. They were followed by waves of other Rakshasas, some riding massive black steeds and others on elephants as large as hills. Laughing loudly, they went out the western gate where Hanuman was stationed. Oh. As the Rakshasas advanced, they saw numerous terrible omens. Ferocious birds of prey circled screaming over the demons. They descended upon Dhumraksha's standard and fought together, sending a shower of feathers onto the demon. A headless trunk, wet with blood, rose from the ground and ran across the path of the charging Rakshasas. Wow! The earth shook and blood fell from the heavens. Darkness enveloped the four quarters. It's morning. And the wind blew strongly into the demons' faces. Not deterred, Dhumraksha raced at the head of the troops. He shouted out challenges in a voice resembling the braying of a donkey. The monkeys roared back and charged. The two armies appeared like two oceans, surging toward one another and then meeting with a tumultuous crash. Demons and monkeys fell by the hundreds and thousands, pierced and smashed by weapons and trees. Some monkeys were transfixed by lances and spears. Others were cut to pieces by waves of arrows. Some were hacked down with swords, and still others were trampled by elephants. In response, the monkeys crushed the Rakshasas with great boulders. They reduced some of the demons to pulp by bringing tree trunks down onto them. They leaped upon the chariots and tore at the Rakshasas with the nails and teeth. Monkeys lifted demons and dashed them to the ground. Enraged, the Rakshasas fought back, throwing punches and kicks that felt like the striking of thunderbolts. Dhumraksha was possessed by a madness for battle. He wrought havoc among the Vanara troops. He could hardly be seen as he rushed about whirling his various weapons. Arrows loosed from his bow seemed to fly in all directions at once. Monkeys fell on all sides, vomiting blood. Heads, arms, and legs flew about. Too much. Oh, boy. I haven't read this battle scene before. It's like I just skipped to the end where it was good stuff. The monkey army was dispersed and put to flight by the enraged Dhumraksha, who thundered like autumnal clouds. In comes Hanuman. Seeing his troops routed by the Rakshasa, Hanuman became furious. His eyes turned red, and he took hold of an enormous boulder. With a roar, he hurled the rock at Dhumraksha's chariot, but Dhumraksha nimbly leaped clear. The chariot, along with its horses and driver, was reduced to a mangled heap. Hanuman then took up a psaltery and whirled it around, attacking Dhumraksha's guards. Within moments, he pounded hundreds of demons to death. The monkey then grasped a mountain peak and raced toward Dhumraksha, who stood with his mace uplifted. As Hanuman approached him, the Rakshasa brought down his mace, which was bedecked with numerous shining points, upon Hanuman's head. It sounded like an explosion, but the monkey was not shaken. Hanuman smashed his mountain peak on Dhumraksha's skull. With his head crushed and all his limbs shattered, Dhumraksha fell dead on the ground. The other demons ran back toward the city, howling in fear. Ravana heard of Dhumraksha's death, and he hissed like an enraged serpent. He spoke at once to Vajra Dangstra, another of the great Rakshasa champions. "Sally forth, O hero, make short work of our enemies." Replying, "So be it," Vajra Dangstra circumambulated Ravana and left his palace. Guess who wins? Vajra Dangstra was artistically adorned with gem-encrusted armlets and a shining diadem, means crown. He put on a golden coat of mail that blazed like fire. Taking up his bow, he mounted his brilliant chariot, which was dressed with hundreds of pennants and decorated with carvings of refined gold. He came out of the southern gate, followed by countless troops holding scimitars, strangely shaped iron clubs, polished maces, bows, javelins, spears, razor-edged discuses, swords, and double-headed axes. They raised a great uproar as they rushed toward the monkey army. Again, many evil omens were seen. Dazzling meteors fell, and hideous jackals belched tongues of fire. The demon troops stumbled and fell on level ground. Vajra Dangstra paid no heed to the grim portents foretelling his defeat. He thundered out of the he thundered out his war cry, rallying the Rakshasas to the fight. The monkeys met them with furious impetuosity. Demons and monkeys collided like mountains, clashing together. Warriors fell with their heads and limbs severed. Others dropped down, being sliced in half from head to toe. Some were crushed, and some were beaten to a pulp. The fighters found their feet sinking in a mire of flesh and blood-soaked earth. The fighters found their feet. I read that. From a distance, the battle produced a sound that resembled a musical performance, with the clash of weapons for its drums, the twang of bowstrings as venas, and the roar of warriors, its loud singing. Vajra Dangstra created havoc on the battlefield. From his chariot, he released tens of thousands of steel arrows with razor-sharp heads. He moved with the speed of the wind, seeming like death himself, come for the destruction of all beings. The formidable Rakshasa employed mystical weapons of every kind and mowed down the monkey troops like wheat in a field. There's one page left. Seeing the destruction, Angada became maddened. With his two serpent-like arms, he clasped a great tree and whirled it around with blinding speed. The monkey prince danced with the tree on the battlefield and crushed innumerable Rakshasas. He moved through the demon troops like a lion through a flock of deer. The Rakshasas fell back in terror as Angada wheeled. Chariots, elephants, horses, and Rakshasas fell on all sides, smashed by the infuriated Vanara. The earth became decorated with golden poles fallen from chariots, as well as bejeweled armlets, necklaces, and diadems, again, crowns, of every sort. A stream of blood flowed on the battlefield, carrying the heads and limbs of Rakshasas slain by Angada, who could not be checked. Vajra Dangstra saw his troops being routed, and, roaring in fury, he rushed toward Angada and shouted out a challenge. He released arrows that flew with uncanny accuracy and pierced 8 or 9 monkeys at a time. In his wake, the demon left heaps of slain monkey warriors who lay with their teeth clenched and eyes still staring in anger. Angada stood firm to receive the fast-approaching Rakshasa. Vajradangsa shot thousands of arrows at Angada and sent up a great shout. The monkey was pierced all over, but he was not shaken. He hurled his tree at the demon, and it whirled through the air with a sound like a rushing gale. Without effort, Vajradangsa tore the tree to pieces with his arrows, even as it flew toward him. Angada leaped up in a nearby hill and tore off a crag. That's like a peak, I guess. Spinning around several times, he threw it with tremendous force at the Rakshasa. Vajradangsa immediately jumped down from his chariot with his iron mace in his hand. The rock descended upon the Rakshas's chariot and shattered into small pieces, crushing the driver and horses. Even as the crag fell, Angada had taken up another and hurled it at the Rakshasa himself. It hit him full on the head, and he fell to the earth, vomiting blood. He lay there unconscious for some minutes, with his mace clasped to his bosom. Coming again to his senses, he got up and flew at Angada, hitting him in the chest with his mace. The monkey remained steady, and the demon began striking him with his fists. Angada returned his blows, and the two fought a fierce hand-to-hand battle for some time, both spitting blood and breathing heavily. Angada uprooted another tree, and he stood, adorned by its flowers and fruit. The demon seized hold of a shield made of bull hide and a great shining sword decorated with golden bells. The two combatants circled one another, each looking for an opportunity to strike the other. They closed and separated again and again, raining down fierce blows. Both became exhausted and sank to their knees. Suddenly, Angada, who was thinking of Ram, sprang to his feet. He took up a fierce-looking sword and swung it at Vajradangsa's neck, lopping off his head. That was it. The Rakshasa dropped to the earth, spitting forth a jet of dark red blood. With their leader slain, the other Rakshasas fled in fear, pursued by the monkeys. Hanging their heads in shame, they swiftly re-entered Lanka. The monkeys surrounded the overjoyed Angada and praised his wonderful feat in killing Vajradangsa. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7, and we're not going to read, but Ravan enters the fray. Prahasta's got to come into this some point in time. I'm glad to know Ram brought everybody back to life. One of the celebrated sections from what we read is like other celebrated sections where the weary battlers or those that are intimidated by the situation give courage to the others. In this particular section, Vibhishan, very expert, assessing the situation and giving courage, not foolishly but wisely, and knowing what's next, because the others were becoming fearful, so going to reassure the others, and so forth. And Trijata, the kind of mystical Rakshasi that had dreams, but had befriended Sita, her reassuring words. A battle is no easy thing. Another nice detail, even before the battle began, giving the last chance to Ravan, although so many chances, but last chance to surrender before the battle would begin. These are, the markings of a noble person. Ignoble persons don't do that. They just attack. Preferably when somebody's not paying attention, because it gives them some advantage. Divine and demoniac nature, once again. I mean, what's the divine nature of one who's doing battle? It's not kind of like not part of our repertoire of things we think about and hear about. But at least some of the parts are here. Way back when Vali was criticizing Ram, because Vali had already shown his power beyond the power of Ravan. Not many had that power, but Vali had that power. Why don't you come to me if you want your wife back? Because he had already, with his spy network, he already knew where Ravan was, and he knew because Tara said, Vali knew how many Rakshasas. That was a little puzzling thing. But I guess they just didn't know for sure whether Sita was there. But the capital of Ravan was known, because Tara said that Vali said. It told to Lakshman. Has that ever, anybody here, puzzled you? They knew. I mean, Lakshman knew, so if Lakshman knew, then Ram knew where's his headquarters and how many you need the Vanaras. So Lakshman, you won't be victorious without the Vanaras. But anyway, it gave them some service, because otherwise Ram could have just finished the whole shebang himself. However, without any extra help. So others were given some service. Although war is not nice, but the purpose of his appearance was to finish Ravan and the Rakshasas, and so that was accomplished, because they had become too powerful, too vicious, terrorizing the universe. At least Ravana. They had to be checked. So let's see if there's some discussion after all that blood-curdling battle scene.
Guru Maharaj, wow.
No, it was told by Jatayu.
Okay.
So
but he was heading in the southern direction, but Rakshasas can be anywhere, not necessarily where the direction he was heading, because they have powers to be wherever they want to be.
Right. Yes, so that means that Tara knew where the headquarters was, and that's the reason for the...
2 plus 2 generally equals 4.
Yeah.
Ravana took his headquarters is in Lanka and how many soldiers he has.
Okay.
But there was uncertainty. So before engaging in the battle or preparing to recover Sita, there was just confirm where Sita is and that she's safe, and report back. Then we'll make the next plan. So that was the sequence.
Also, Maharaj, does it say how many days the war was going on? Like in Mahabharata, it says exactly 18 days.
Yeah. I don't. There's probably some number, but I don't know.
And we are reading the first day of war here.
Well, we read this the next morning also.
Okay. The first day next morning.
But I'm sure our scholarly know the answer to that. Anything else?
One question.
Yeah.
This is from Uma Mataji, and the question is: just as everyone on the battlefield of Kurukshetra were liberated, was it the same for this battle? What happened to everyone?
Well, specifically, those who are killed by Krishna or in Krishna's presence are liberated. However, it's not the same. Could we turn that speaker pointing this direction? Yeah. It's not the same for other Vishnu Tattva forms. No, where they certainly become, by being killed on battle, their sins are neutralized, but achieving liberation is not necessarily the case. So I don't know the answer to that. So I now have two questions to ask our scholars. How many days, and where did the Rakshasas go? We know what happened to the Vanaras. They were brought back to life. And they continued in their service. Most likely at some point, because they were fathered by the demigods, they returned to their position of being with the demigods, I would assume. But they had done some, fantastic service. Risked their life, fantastic service. Let's see. It's likely to be in commentary somewhere. I'll see if our scholars have that answer. And if they're listening, they can send in a text message while we're together. Anything else? That's it.
This is from Sanchari Dasi. Guru Maharaj, as we were reading about how the war progressed into the night, I couldn't help but compare it to the Kurukshetra battle, where the fighting stopped at the end of the day.
Yes.
What was the reason that this code was not upheld in this battle?
Because they're Rakshasas. They don't follow codes. They get stronger at night. Let's go. That's the Rakshasa rule. Go back to Vishvamitra's advice to kill Tattaka because the Rakshasas become more powerful at night. So before the night falls, finish her. So they don't stop it. they don't follow a rule like that. And it's not only, Jambavan fought all night and those kinds of things. But specifically for Rakshasas, it's not nightfall, doesn't stop anything. Anything else?
Maharaj, in the description, there's a lot of description about how the heroes on the Rakshasa side were killed. And the Rakshasas were really powerful, but there's nothing telling about
There's nothing. It's mentioned. Bodies with arrows and heads chopped off and things like that.
But not any of the leaders on the monkey side.
Well, this is the retelling by Krishna Dharma. Exactly what's in Valmiki Ramayana. As I said, I never read that section before. It was like I don't like battle scenes. It's not yummy. So I went to the end. So I don't know what Valmiki Ramayana says. We know what Krishna Dharma's retelling is. And it doesn't speak of the leaders being killed. And, that's maybe a third question. Were any leaders amongst the Vanaras killed? It seems like not, because when they return to Lanka, they're all there. But those are three questions for our Ramayana scholars. And again, if any of you scholars are listening, you please tell us. Otherwise, I'll do it when I get back. Send a little message out.
Just one more question.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, is there any difference between Daitya Rakshasas, Asura and Dhanava?
Well, each name means something. There's more?
Yeah, with regard to their internal and external disposition.
Oh. There's probably, I don't know, the refinement of their internal disposition. Daitya refers to sons of Diti. Rakshasas are demons or asuras, and they're all asuras, but so they're a particular category of asura. That is to say, they have mystic powers, they have shape-changing abilities, they can travel all over the place. Commonly, they reside in the region. Commonly, they can reside anywhere, but commonly they reside in the Bhuvar Loka region, but they can also reside in the lower planetary regions, and they can reside on the Earth planet. So when they reside on the Earth planet, it's pretty difficult. And that's what Ram was requested to dismiss them, because the demigods couldn't do it because of Brahma. So Daitya, Danava, I forget what the meaning is. It's the vague recollection. So maybe there's another question for me to research. I can do that on my own. But Danava seems to be similar to the word asura, but I'm not sure of that. But the internal disposition, I don't know. Other than Rakshasas like to eat flesh, specifically. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, we hear of personalities from Treta Yuga in Dwapara, but are there any from Dwapara in Kali Yuga? This is from Neeraj Bhatnagar.
Well, there was somebody, one of the Chinese devotees raised a question about something from 5th canto, forget which chapter. If Surabhi is here, she can send it to you right now. She's listening. But it says in the Bhagavatam that Bharat Maharaj ruled for 10 million years. Now 10 million years is longer than, it's several yuga cycles. Because Satya Yuga, 100,000, and then 10 million is like several yuga cycles. So the question was, how do we understand that? Was because it's a verse in the Bhagavatam. So a short answer is, it's the exception, but there are some jivas called chiran jivas, and they live for a very long time. Here's some examples. Jambavan is an example. He was not only present during Ram's Leela, but he's present during Krishna's Leela. And Ram's Leela, listen carefully, Ram's Leela, according to Rupa Goswami, Ram's pastimes take place during the 24th Yuga cycle of Vaivasvata Manu. And this is the 28th Yuga cycle of Vaivasvata Manu when Krishna appears. So there's several Yuga cycles in between. So Jambavan lived for a really long time. Vyasadeva lives for a real long time, because it's said that Vyasadeva and his ashram in Upper Badri descend after Kalki Avatar comes and starts the Satya Yuga. So Bali Maharaj, it's mentioned in the Bhagavatam, in the 8th canto. Bali Maharaj, in the next Manu, Suvarna Manu, became Indra. So that's like spanning, many yuga cycles. So those are some examples. There's others who live for a long time. That's the exception. And the rule is whatever the rule is. The maximum life duration, that's the rule. Then there's exceptions to the rule. And we know who makes the exceptions, because he makes the rules too. So does that address the question? Yes or no? Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Regarding the pastimes of the narratives, that I find it very challenging for me to stay focused and attentive when I hear pastimes as compared to Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. Is that an obstacle that I need to address?
Well, what about the pastimes in the Bhagavatam? You have difficulty focusing on Bhagavatam pastimes?
No, probably it's the style of writing of Srila Prabhupada is always, there is a philosophy even in pastimes, so it's very different than the continuous narrative.
Okay. I don't think it's an obstacle. Some like pakoras, and some like sabji, and some like parathas. And, different people like different things. So I don't think it's an obstacle if you like this one instead of that one. But a little bit, it's good to have a variety in your menu, even if you like some more of this and not as much of that. It's still good to have variety. Similarly, some people like reading, and some people don't like chanting. Some people like kirtan and don't like japa. Some people like, there's a place for everything. So it's good to, that's not something, it's not an obstacle, it's something to worry about. But you just continue even if you don't have that same absorption, because it's what we're provided. Many people, many people outside of disciplic succession have, they don't have the Bhaktivedanta purports. They just have the verses. I can't remember where, but somebody from Kerala said their mother or grandmother would read the Bhagavatam every day for hours, but they didn't have the Prabhupada's purports, so they came to America, became a devotee, and they sent their mother a BBT in their language that her mother could read, or grandmother, whichever. And she said, for the first time, I'm understanding the Bhagavatam. She had a heart attraction. So it's not an obstacle. It's something you should, eat your spinach along with the samosas. Over here. We forgot the little sanitizing wipes. Is that what's going on? Do you have any in the house? Sanitizing wipes? Okay. What I've done, and it's a pastime. Giving, so the pastime is giving the Vanaras the sense of loss, and then regain after the loss. It's stirring. It's an opportunity for churning or stirring transcendental emotion on the part of the Lord's devotees. So the Lord does things to give that experience of different rasa tastes, the spinach along with the pakoras. Anything else? We're okay? Couple more? Let's go.
This is from Uttama Bhakta Dasa.
Uh-huh.
Does Lord Ram come every Treta Yuga? That's the question.
No. That should be a little more than that abrupt. According to, I said it before, according to Rupa Goswami in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Laghu Bhagavatamrita, making reference to Kurma Purana, he comes once in a day of Brahma. You paying attention? Uttam Bhakta is paying attention, even if you're not. Once in a day of Brahma. Once in a day of Brahma. And during the 24th Yuga cycle of Vaivasvata Manu is when Ram comes, once in a day of Brahma, as Krishna comes once in a day of Brahma. So not every Treta Yuga.
One more question.
Yeah.
So, this is from Radha Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna Maharaj, my query regarding King Bharata's 10 million years of ruling. Many devotees gave similar responses as my assumption.
Yes.
Priyavarta's father is a Manu. Manus live for 71 to 72 yuga cycles.
Yes.
Srila Prabhupada also writes in Bhagavad Gita and in many parts of Srimad Bhagavatam the duration of Manus. Also, it is said that Priyavarta's own sons took up the posts of Manu.
Yes.
So we can extrapolate that there are superior beings and their descendants with long lifespans exist in Bhuloka planetary systems.
Yes.
They may not be many, but they are there.
Yes.
Similarly, there are the Prajapatis and Rishis who live the entire duration of a yuga cycle. I asked Gagan Darshan Prabhu in Govardhan Echo village, and he said the same, that there are beings with long lifespan and that compared to a Manu, and Bharata's ruling for 10 million years is nothing.
Yeah.
Hope this helps. If you do find a better explanation, kindly inform me. Thanks.
That's something, that text is a text that Radhakrishna sent to me, that you just read. He sent to me, and then I found some additional information. But it amounts to the same. We were discussing this when we were together in Houston. Okay, so I think we're
That's it.
wrapped up.
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.